Supreme Court of India sets historic 3-month deadline for President to act on bills referred by governors. In a groundbreaking judgment on April 12, 2025, the Supreme Court of India delivered a ruling that promises to reshape the dynamics of legislative processes and center-state relations. For the first time, the Apex Court has mandated a 3-month deadline for the President of India to decide on bills referred by state governors, addressing a long-standing constitutional ambiguity under Article 201 of the Constitution. The decision, pronounced by a bench comprising Justices J.B. Padiwala and R. Mahadevan, marks a significant step toward ensuring accountability, curbing arbitrary delays, and reinforcing the principles of federalism in India's governance framework. This ruling not only sets a clear timeline but also limits the scope for what has been described as a pocket veto by the President, fundamentally altering the balance of power in legislative decision-making. Background: the constitutional conundrum. The Indian Constitution, under Article 200, outlines the role of governors in the legislative process. When a state legislature passes a bill, it is presented to the governor, who has 3 options: grant assent, withhold assent, subject to certain conditions, or reserve the bill for the President's consideration. Article 201 governs the subsequent process, stating that when a bill is reserved, the President may either assent to or withhold assent from the bill. However, the Constitution does not specify a time frame for the President's decision, creating a loophole that has over the years led to prolonged delays and tensions between states and the center. This ambiguity has been a recurring source of friction, particularly in states governed by political parties opposed to those at the center. Governors, often perceived as representatives of the union government, have occasionally delayed or withheld assent to bills, sometimes referring them to the President without clear justification. The absence of a constitutional deadline for the President's action has allowed bills to languish indefinitely, effectively granting what legal scholars term a pocket veto, a silent rejection through inaction. The issue came to a head in recent years, with several states including Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Punjab approaching the Supreme Court to challenge gubernatorial delays. The present case originated from Tamil Nadu, where Governor R.N. Ravi was accused of illegally withholding assent to 10 bills passed by the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, DMK-led state government. The Supreme Court's intervention was sought to clarify the roles of governors and the President and to address the constitutional gap regarding timelines. The Supreme Court's ruling, a landmark decision. The Supreme Court's verdict on April 12, 2025, is a response to these systemic issues. The bench ruled that the President must decide on bills referred by governors within 3 months from the date of receipt. If this deadline is exceeded, the President is required to provide valid reasons for the delay and communicate them to the state concerned. The court emphasized that the President does not possess an absolute or pocket veto, and that inaction beyond the stipulated period could be subject to judicial review. We prescribed that the President is required to decide on the bills reserved for his consideration by the governor within 3 months from the date on which such reference is received, the bench declared. The ruling further clarified that while the President's role under Article 201 involves careful consideration, this cannot be an excuse for arbitrary or capricious delays. Delay on the part of the President in deciding a reference under Article 201, without any justification or necessity, would fall foul of the basic constitutional principle that the exercise of power must not be arbitrary, the court noted. The decision draws on guidelines issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs and recommendations from past constitutional commissions, notably the Sarkaria Commission 1983 and the Panchi Commission, both of which advocated for timelines to ensure efficient disposal of bills under Article 201. The court's adoption of a 3-month deadline aligns with these recommendations, formalizing a structured process where none existed before. The Tamil Nadu context, a catalyst for change. The ruling stems from a specific dispute involving Tamil Nadu Governor R.N. Ravi, who had withheld assent to 10 bills passed by the state legislature. The DMK government argued that the governor's actions were unconstitutional, accusing him of overstepping his authority and undermining the state's legislative autonomy. The Supreme Court agreed, declaring that the governor's inaction was illegal and that reserving bills for the President's consideration without sufficient grounds violated constitutional norms. This case is part of a broader pattern of center-state conflicts, particularly in opposition-ruled states. Tamil Nadu has been at the forefront of such disputes, with the DMK government repeatedly clashing with the governor over issues ranging from appointments to legislative approvals. The Supreme Court's verdict not only addresses the immediate grievance, but also sets a precedent for other states facing similar challenges, reinforcing the principle that governors must act within the bounds of constitutional propriety. Implications for federalism. The Supreme Court's decision has far-reaching implications for India's federal structure. By imposing a deadline on the President's decision-making, The court has strengthened the autonomy of state legislatures, ensuring that their legislative efforts are not indefinitely stalled by the center. This is particularly significant in a political landscape where ideological differences between state and central governments often lead to governance gridlocks. The ruling also curtails the discretionary powers of governors, who have sometimes been criticized for acting as agents of the union government rather than impartial constitutional heads. By making gubernatorial inaction challengeable in court, the verdict empowers states to seek judicial recourse, thereby balancing the scales in center-state relations. Moreover, the decision underscores the judiciary's role as a guardian of federalism. The Supreme Court has in recent years intervened in several disputes involving governors, including cases from Punjab and Kerala, where similar issues of delay and overreach were raised. This latest ruling builds on that jurisprudence, establishing a robust framework to prevent the misuse of constitutional provisions. Critical analysis beyond the headline. While the Supreme Court's ruling has been widely hailed as a victory for federalism, a closer examination reveals both its strengths and potential limitations. On one hand, the 3-month deadline introduces much-needed clarity and accountability. It addresses a practical problem that has hindered governance in several states, ensuring that bills, often related to critical issues like education, health, or social welfare, are not left in limbo. The requirement for the president to justify delays further promotes transparency, aligning with democratic principles. However, the ruling does not entirely eliminate the scope for discretion. The president retains the authority to withhold assent, and the court has not specified what constitutes valid reasons for delay beyond 3 months. This leaves room for interpretation, which could lead to future disputes. Additionally, the effectiveness of the ruling depends on its implementation. Governors and the president's office may still find ways to navigate around the deadline, perhaps by citing procedural complexities or national security concerns. Another point of contention is the broader role of governors in India's federal setup. Critics argue that the office of the governor, a colonial relic, is inherently prone to misuse, particularly in politically charged contexts. The Supreme Court's ruling, while addressing one aspect of this issue, does not tackle the larger question of whether the governor's powers should be reformed or redefined to better suit India's democratic ethos. From a contrarian perspective, some may argue that imposing strict timelines on the president could constrain the executive's ability to thoroughly evaluate complex legislation. Bills reserved for the president's consideration often involve matters of national importance or potential conflicts with central laws requiring careful scrutiny. A rigid deadline might pressure the president into hasty decisions, potentially compromising the quality of governance. Voices from the ground. The ruling has elicited varied reactions from political leaders, legal experts, and citizens. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin welcomed the verdict, describing it as a triumph for democracy and a vindication of the state's fight against gubernatorial overreach. Opposition parties, including the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party, echoed similar sentiments, viewing the decision as a check on the centre's influence over states. Conversely, some leaders from the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, have expressed cautious support, emphasizing the need for balance between state autonomy and national interests. Legal scholars have praised the ruling's clarity but cautioned that its success hinges on consistent enforcement. This is a step forward, but the devil lies in the details, noted a prominent constitutional lawyer, speaking on condition of anonymity. Courts will need to remain vigilant to ensure compliance. Public sentiment, as reflected in discussions on platforms like X, is largely positive, with many users celebrating the decision as a win for federalism. However, there are dissenting voices questioning whether the ruling will lead to practical change or remain a symbolic gesture, given the complexities of India's political system. The road ahead. The Supreme Court's verdict sets the stage for a new chapter in India's legislative process. States now have a clearer path to challenge delays, and the President's office faces greater scrutiny in its handling of referred bills. The ruling may also prompt further legal challenges as states test the boundaries of the new framework. In the long term, the decision could spark a broader debate on constitutional reforms, particularly regarding the role of governors and the distribution of powers between the centre and states. The Sarkaria and Punchi Commission's recommendations, which the court referenced, include several proposals that remain unimplemented. Policymakers may now face renewed pressure to revisit these suggestions and address systemic issues in India's federal structure. For now, the focus remains on implementation. The Tamil Nadu government has already signaled its intent to monitor the progress of the 10 bills at the heart of the dispute, while other states are likely to follow suit. The judiciary too will play a critical role, as future cases will determine how the 3-month deadline is enforced and whether it withstands political pressures. Conclusion. The Supreme Court's ruling on April 12, 2025, is a milestone in India's constitutional journey. By setting a 3-month deadline for the President to act on bills referred by governors, the court has addressed a long-standing gap in the legislative process, reinforcing the principles of accountability, federalism, and democratic governance. While challenges remain, ranging from enforcement to potential loopholes, the verdict marks a significant shift toward a more equitable center-state relationship. As India navigates its complex political landscape, this decision serves as a reminder of the judiciary's power to shape governance and uphold the constitution's spirit. For states like Tamil Nadu, it is a moment of vindication. For the nation, it is an opportunity to strengthen the foundations of its democracy. Only time will tell whether this ruling becomes a catalyst for lasting change or a fleeting triumph in the ongoing saga of federalism.